Hey now, Brawlers, it's time for another Board Game Brawl review with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey peeps, today we're going to take a look at Legendary Big Trouble in Little China from Upper Deck. Now this is very important to note. This is not an Encounters Legendary game. You would think that because all of the Encounters games so far have used licensed IP. I mean, technically Marvel Legendary, the original Legendary game, does as well. But no movies or such. But this one is based directly off of Marvel Legendary, meaning same core rules, not fully cooperative, it's semi-cooperative, and technically it's compatible with Marvel Legendary. They're all supposed to be compatible, but this one more so, but we'll talk more about that in my final thoughts. There's some reasons why you might not want to do that. But more importantly than all that, this is based off of Big Trouble in Little China, and Big Trouble in Little China is one of my favorite movies. If you haven't watched it, it is one of the quintessential goofy, schlocky 80s movies. Quintessential Kurt Russell movies for sure. And I encourage you to watch it. You may not like it. I do think it's sort of a dude movie, if I could say that. I've showed it to several ex-girlfriends of mine, and none of them have really liked it very much. I remember one of them specifically just looked at me after it was done and said, "That was just stupid." But it is. But it's still great. It's a John Carpenter movie. He's great. He actually said this was one of his biggest failures, and box office-wise, it was, for sure, when it came out. And I don't even think critics liked it at the time. But in hindsight, it's become a cult hit, and I still love it. I watch it occasionally. It's just a quick synopsis. It's Kurt Russell, big, doofy, white guy, goes to Chinatown. He's a big rig truck operator. He gets mixed in with this like secret villain named Lo Pan, who has like the secret society of villains, like the mafia underworld version, of China version, that's in Chinatown in San Francisco, and is trying to resurrect this ancient old evil god, something like that. But Kurt Russell's friends in Chinatown, they all team up together and go and try to put a stop to Lo Pan and his evil machinations. There's karate warriors, a lot of crazy stuff in the movie. I can go on and on. And it's just very fun. The special effects at the time were great. The creature effects were great. Lots of monsters in it, which you also see in the game. And one thing that someone I played with who also enjoyed the movie pointed out that I hadn't really thought about before, but makes total sense as to why it's so much better than so many other similar movies, is that, there's this, I know, I'm going on and on. If you hate my long introductions, you can skip ahead, that's fine. But I just want to talk about Big Trouble in Little China. The thing about it was, there's so many movies where, and this has become notorious lately as a matter of fact, where big, strong, white man comes in and saves the day for all of these Asian people. And The Last Samurai was like that with Tom Cruise. Most notably, very recently was, I think it's either called The Wall or The Great Wall with Matt Damon, where he's like the white guy coming to save the Asian people working on the Great Wall or something like that. And it's just like a really tired old trope that needs to go away. Well, you would think that's happening in Big Trouble in Little China because Kurt Russell, big, strong, white action hero, comes in to save the day. But he really doesn't. He does, but he's a bumbling oaf, is the phrase that my friend used. There's one part where he's like, "Yeah, go USA," and shoots his gun in the air and the ceiling comes down and knocks him out. All of the other Asian people in the movie are far more competent and get things done much more than he does. And it's just but he still like kind of wins out the day for the group, but he just even goofs into that. And it's such a great thing. It's such like a turning a trope on its head type thing, especially the very end of the movie. So I appreciate that. So, having been excited about the movie so much, is Legendary Big Trouble in Little China a game system that I love? Is that going to hold up? Does it all come together into one coherent package? Well, let me give you a brief overview of what's new in this version. Then we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Whew.
Legendary Big Trouble in Little China is a semi-cooperative game for 2 to 5 players. Note what I just said there. Other Legendary sets can be played solo, but this set has many cards that force the players to interact with each other whether they like it or not, and therefore is not appropriate for solo play. Other than that, this game follows the exact same core rules of the original Marvel Legendary, not Encounters, and is mostly compatible with that set. However, there are several smaller but significant rules and style changes, which we'll discuss as we go along. Let's start off with the playmat, which has one of the most noticeable changes. While the city has all of the typical Legendary spaces, 2 of the spaces are marked off as Chinatown. This is important for several hero and villain effects. Players start with the typical starting decks consisting of gray recruit and combat cards, and as usual you can always purchase a 2-star recruit card, which in this game is Uncle Chu. He actually has a special ability. If you don't defeat any villains, you can KO a wound. That's because wounds are flying around a bit more than usual in this version of the game. Another significant change in this version is the addition of mediocre heroes. Every player starts with 2 random mediocre heroes in their starting decks. As the name implies, they're somewhere between your basic gray cards and lineup heroes in terms of usefulness. They all give 1 of a certain currency and another if a certain condition is met. On to the real heroes. We'll talk about the 2 main heroes, Jack Burton and Wang Chi first, and here's a small but important difference from other Legendary sets. These 2 heroes, and only these 2 heroes, have an extra card option in their decks. If you use them, you choose 2 out of 3 identical 5-card sets to play with, and leave the third 5-card set in the box. The end result is that you have 4 types of cards for a total of 14 cards, just like every other hero in every other Legendary. Jack Burton's cards heavily emphasize a major stylistic difference in this game, and that's that it is far more competitive than the original Legendary, often forcing other players to discard, hand over, or even KO cards against their will. His ultimate also points out that the final Mastermind Showdown, an optional variant in the original Marvel Legendary, is now a mandatory rule, and this card makes it easier to win that showdown. Wang Chi has a dick card like that, but his other cards just emphasize playing multiple cards of different classes, especially his ultimate Mucho Combat card. Gracie Law's artwork sticks out like a sore thumb. A couple of her cards give both recruit and combat and rescue bystanders, and her ultimate points out another small difference in this game, in that it gives a bigger bonus if particular hero cards are involved. Egg Shen is all about combat, has a weird card that relies on a coin flip to determine the bonus, and his ultimate nets you a free hero from the stack by KOing one from your hand. Mao Yen manipulates heroes in players' hands and discard piles, and her ultimate actually forces other players to give her player a non-gray hero as a gift. Eddie's cards are a bit all over the place, but a couple of them have to do with the new Chinatown delineation, including his ultimate, which can send a villain who's there back to the stack. Margot's cards are maybe the most interesting because they're not overtly powerful, but could be very useful depending on the situation. Her ultimate screws up the villain, letting you look at the top 3 cards, defeating any villains and rescuing any bystanders, and then placing another bystander on top of the deck, which I just find very interesting. Henry Swanson, who I don't even remember from the movie, honestly, has cards that are powerful but at a price, including his ultimate, which forces players to pass along heroes to other players, but gives a bonus if you give a powerful one. Finally, of course, they made the Pork Chop Express, Jack's truck, into a hero. It can manipulate villains in the city and gets bonuses if Jack is involved. There are normal bystanders and special bystanders, one which is actually bad for you, interestingly enough, making the villain that it's attached to tougher. The other general bad cards are the same with no differences: Wounds, Master Strikes, and Scheme Twists. For Masterminds, there are 4. Many of their tactics are extremely harmful to other players. David Lopan's Master Strikes cause only one player to discard 2 cards, and one of his tactics forces other players to take a bunch of wounds. Sorceress Lopan's strikes will bounce one of his warriors of Lopan back to the deck and then draw it again to use its nasty ambush ability again. One of his tactics forces other players who have damaged him to KO an expensive card. Qing Dai is arguably the most aggravating mastermind, as he gobbles up every zero-cost recruitment-producing card the heroes KO, making him stronger, and his tactics are just as dicky. Lastly, 6-Shooter is the easiest mastermind, though he's stronger if villains are in Chinatown, but even he has at least one annoying tactic. There are 3 different henchman groups and 4 different villain groups. I'm not going to go into excessive detail here, but it is important to note that many of their ambush, fight, and escape effects are extremely harmful, and oftentimes single out specific opponents, which opportunistic players will use to their advantage to screw their opponents. Finally, there are a whopping 12 schemes, which is pretty amazing considering we're talking about one 2-hour movie that probably had 1 or maybe 2 actual schemes. Nevertheless, these lend a lot of variety to the game and also showcase its worst art.
So it would be incredibly obnoxious of me to say that I'm a legendary expert. That's up to other people. And I would probably, if you forced me to answer, I'd probably say no. Because if you look on like the Board Game Geek message boards, there's people that go through every single card of every legendary and run all the stats and do the numbers and custom make the decks and all this different type of stuff that I just don't do. And I love the game, but I just have a lot of experience with it. And that's where I'm coming from when I say that this is probably the worst set of Legendary. Not by a wide margin, and it's not a terrible game by any means. The fact that it is Legendary and uses the core Legendary rules, you may like Encounters better than normal Legendary, that's fine, a lot of people do. I like them both, I actually tend to like Marvel Legendary better. So I was very open to this one, and of course, it's Big Trouble in Little China. Great, awesome! But there's a lot of significant problems with this that I can see some people not really caring about, but for me personally, it killed my enjoyment of this game to the point that despite the fact that it's Legendary, despite the fact that it's technically compatible with the other Legendary, and despite the fact that it is Big Trouble in Little China, I'm probably not going to keep it. So let's start with the theme of the game, because I was actually very worried about that. Not that I don't like Big Trouble, but that how could you make a full Legendary core set based off of one 2-hour movie, okay? I really thought they would have stretched the theme to be paper thin. And I think they did in some places. Like I mentioned in the overview, there's like 12 or 13 schemes in the box, when really there was like 2 schemes in the entire movie. and some of them they clearly made up. But that's fine. Honestly, when I sat down to actually play the game and played it with people who had watched the movie before, and people who didn't and had no idea what the hell we were making comments about, which is even funnier, we got into it. It was fun seeing these characters, reliving those moments. You'll definitely enjoy the theme 500% more, if that's even possible, if you've watched the movie before. If you haven't, you might not like the game even that much. So it really does help, and I'm happy the theme is on here. And that's why it's sad that I don't like the game itself better. Another fault I can, a simpler fault I could point out with the game is just that the artwork is very uneven. If you've watched my Firefly review going up at the same time as this, you'll know that that's been a problem for Legendary apparently. Although I think it's better in here. It's a little more consistent in this version. But like for example, the cards for Gracie Law, while I can't say that artwork is terrible in and of itself, it's so inconsistent with the rest of the game, and artwork is very important in these games, that it sticks out like a sore thumb. But that's subjective. That could be a minor quibble. There's also the typical problems of sorting it out. It's a pain in the butt. But there seems to be less cards in this set overall, which makes sense. Like there's less heroes, less villain groups than the other Legendary core sets. So take that as you will. That's either a big drawback or not that big a deal to you, depending on what experience you have with Legendary. So why do I not like this set? The big problem I have is that it exacerbates the existing problem of Marvel Legendary. The thing that always bugs me about the original, but that with more expansions over time was sort of it was never that prominent an issue to begin with, and with expansions over time, it was kind of killed altogether. And that's that the game is semi-cooperative. Now, in the original Marvel Legendary, most of the time that's irrelevant. Some of the villains and masterminds that you face in later expansions are so difficult, and everyone has such a cooperative mindset going, that you don't think about the semi-cooperative aspect. Yeah, you count up points at the end if you survive, but no one even cares about that. And any of the heroes that have to do with victory points aren't so obnoxious that you worry about it. So, like, for instance, there's a Ghost Rider hero that kills victory points from people's piles. But who cares? I mean, yeah, it matters if you really care about the points, but it doesn't affect the gameplay at all. The same absolutely cannot be said for Legendary Big Trouble in Little China, because so many cards in this set directly screw over the other players in significant ways. From discard cards, give me cards, not just, in some cases, just the crappy gray cards, in some cases, important good cards, and KO cards from your hand. It's not just the cards that you play on other players, which you are just going to do because they're good cards. You can't avoid them. So it's not just like the heroes that you buy, it's the monsters that you fight and the villains that you fight. Some of them affect everybody, but some of them are just like, if you fight this, pick someone else to get fucked over. Or mastermind tactics, same thing. Fight this tactic, everyone else gets fucked somehow. And it's just so omnipresent in the game. And what's even more annoying about that is that there, as I mentioned in my overview, two of the heroes, Jack and Wang Chi, have a new thing to Legendary, which I thought was very cool, which is that, so every hero has 14 total cards, and two of the cards, there will always be 5 copies of, like two of the weaker cards, or weakest cards perhaps. But what they did with Jack and Wang Chi only in this set was give them 3 options for those cards. You pick 2 of them and leave the other set of 5 out. If they had only done that for every hero in this game, not only would that in itself be cool, but if they had done it in such a way that you could remove the negative cards and just play the game as cooperatively as possible, that would have been great, but they didn't do that. It's very aggravating that there was a chance, like they certainly had a glimmer of hope that they would do something like that, and they just chose not to. And look, I don't mind competitive games. I play a lot of deck building games, and most of them are competitive, and some of them have a lot of player screwage in them. And I'm fine with it in that context. But at this point, why is this not cooperative? Why is the entire Legendary franchise not cooperative? It's clearly built that way. And they point out several times in the rulebook, whoever wrote it wrote, like, this is in the spirit of Big Trouble in Little China. No, it's not. In Big Trouble in Little China, they are a team of people who come together and have a goal to stop the evil bad guy. They might bicker a little bit, but it's far and away from, like, really screwing each other over, which can happen in this game, enough to screw up the game and make you lose, which happened one of the times that we played because players were being selfish because the game insisted on it. And it's so omnipresent here that it just killed the experience for me and a lot of the other people that I played with. On top of which, they reinstituted the showdown rule as not optional, like it was in the original Marvel Legendary, but mandatory, because at least one card exclusively has to do with that, Jack Burton's ultimate card. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Adds more time to the game, not worthwhile, not fun. I could also talk about the compatibility thing, because there's so many cards in this set that specifically have to do with other cards in this set. Cards that say, oh, well, if there's a Jack Burton in the lineup, there's a Gracie Law in the lineup, if you have played X, Y, and Z character, you get the extra bonus from this. Well, by doing that, you're making it so that you really can't use these cards with other sets unless you just don't want to get the card's full effect, which is awkward and weird. Okay? It's not the way I would have gone about it. Maybe saying different classes of hero, with certain heroes in this game being predominantly of certain classes. I don't know. But by doing that, it sort of sanctioned this game off from the rest of the Legendary universe, making it not as compatible. And frankly, if I'm not going to be able to use this with other Legendary products to its full effect, then I'm not going to be able to overlook the significant problems that I have with it. Now, this is purely subjective. You may not care about that at all. You may enjoy the take that elements. I don't. A lot of people in my group didn't. And for that reason, this is by far, well, maybe not by far, but it is the worst Legendary set for me. Which is a shame because I love the content, the theme so much. But for me, there's more than enough Marvel Legendary content, and that game feels like they did not go out of their way to put screw you cards into it. So I'll stick with that. That is Legendary Big Trouble in Little China. Pass for me, sadly.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.